people joke about selling ice to an Eskimo, right? You sold a travel company in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. How did you do that?
At a discount.
As a lawyer, we didn't learn a lot about business in law school, right?
Zero.
They didn't tell you. Yeah, zero, literally zero.
There's like no expectation of people having fun or enjoying
Right.
it. It's like you're
law firms are just like accepted. You're going to be miserable.
going to be miserable, but you're going to make good money.
Right.
I said, I respect you as an entrepreneur, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this idea I have. And his eyes got really big, and he said, like, tell me more.
That's amazing.
And I told him the idea, and he invested on the spot.
Wow.
To get an honest appraisal of myself, I hired a executive coach to come in and to interview all of the employees to ask how I am. And it came back very, very negative. Like, I think my average was like a 2.3 out of 5.
Wow.
Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Welcome to Law Flip. It's a conversation about law, life, business, and everything in between. I'm Benji Smith. So this gentleman perfectly embodies what we're about at Law Flip. So he wasn't fully content with his lawyer gig. And he had an idea on an app that ultimately got acquired after years of building it out. What was it like? How did he do it? What advice does he have for those struggling to take shots in their career, particularly lawyers? We're excited to have the brilliant Ryan Wenger. Let's flip the game upside down. So don't forget to follow us everywhere on social media at LawFlip. Call us at our new phone number, 1-833-LawFlip. Okay, Ryan, how you doing today?
Good, very good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so you grew up in New York.
Yep.
Okay, then you come out where I meet you at USC.
Yep.
Right? And then you go to UC Hastings for law school.
Yep.
You finish law school and you take the traditional route. You start working for a law firm, right? Mm-hmm. How many law firms did you work for after law school?
A couple.
Okay, and how many years from the time you started working out of law school to the time you started this business, which we'll talk about?
It took about 6 years of practice to get started. Mm-hmm. And then I did it on the side for a couple of years. So, yeah.
Like, what on the side?
I built the app, built the company on the side.
Okay, so let's talk about the company. What is the company?
So the company started as Where4, which was the first search engine based on your budget for travel. So you could put in your budget. You say, like, I have $800. Where in the world can I go, flight and hotel, for $800 this weekend?
Which is amazing because we all want to know, like, okay, I want to spend $1,000. Where could that get me in the country or the world?
Yeah.
And so you build this, you have this idea, but you're a lawyer. And like the traditional lawyer idea is, no, wait, you're not going to explore this idea with an app. You're going to continue working as a lawyer.
Yeah.
So how did you do it? How did you get to the point where you felt comfortable really exploring this concept?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you want to de-risk, your risky things like building a company. So I think like a lot of the famous cases of entrepreneurs are ones that had kind of invisible helping hands behind them, where they came from affluent backgrounds and they can always work at their parents' company if worse comes to worse.
And was that you? Did you have the parents that you could always fall back on?
No. So, in my case and most people's case, they have to pursue their passion in a way that doesn't risk everything. So for me, that was being a full-time attorney and on the side, on top of my hours, building this app. So I had pitched this. So, rewind to like college, traveling as much as possible on my student loans. I'd always like want to know what are my options based on my budget. And I was frustrated that websites didn't allow you to do that. You had to say, I'm going to Las Vegas. How much is flight and hotel? So I came up with the idea, not the way of doing it, but just the concept a long time ago in like college. And then I kind of pitched the idea to everyone I met practically. I was just constantly talking about it.
Not worrying that they were going to steal it, just thinking like, I want somebody to
Correct.
just
I think
hear
it's a
this.
big mistake when people like try to keep their idea confidential and make people sign NDAs and stuff. It's more likely that'll hurt you than help you.
That's kind of like the common LA story of like the two kids in LA who are fighting over the executive producer credit and they never end up writing the script.
Exactly. So it's very similar entertainment.
Yeah.
Although actually, I kind of feel like it happens more in entertainment. I have heard of scripts being stolen.
Yeah.
And but in technology, the hard part is execution.
Yeah.
So it's really more worth putting it out there. So I did. I put it out there all the time. I shared it with my boss, Darren Enenstein, at I'd switched firms from a bigger firm to a boutique, and was at lunch with him, and he just wanted to talk like law and like my caseload, and I knew that he was a bit of an entrepreneur, so I kind of pitched extra hard to him the concept. I said, I respect you as an entrepreneur, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this idea I have. Really softball way of pitching it. And his eyes got really big, and he said, like, tell me more.
That's amazing.
And I told him the idea, and he invested on the spot.
Wow.
No business plan, no experience. He just said, how much would I have to pay to own half of this company?
Wow. Okay, so then you take his money, and then what's next?
So yeah, the deal that we had was that I could build it from the office as long as it didn't interfere with my billable hours. So I still had crazy billable hours. I could build like over 2,200, 2,300 billable hours a year. It's worked nights and weekends. It didn't really feel like, work because it was so exciting, building something from scratch. And about a year and a half later, after we launched it, it was big enough that I was able to quit the law firm, take a livable salary, and do it after most of the risk had been taken out of the picture.
That's incredible. And then didn't you end up getting more funding from Rob Dyrdek?
Yeah, we've raised about 12 before we sold the company. We raised about $12 million. And the first like kind of institutional investor, I can go into, how we raise money, but generally speaking, you start with friends and family. In that case, it was Darren and like a couple of his friends. Because your family
was not investing into this thing.
Exactly. So friends and family, like other people's friends and family, you just got to find that one person. So his friends and family, and then we built it to a certain place, and then pitched it to Rob Dyrdek through like random connection, Beverly Hills Ferrari. Like Darren had bought a car from their manager, and he told the manager about the idea. The manager said, "Oh, Rob just came in and bought a car. You should talk. I think he'd be interested." So he connected us. We went over the Fantasy Factory. Yeah. And got to know him. He's a very cool guy, super smart and like energetic. And he put in the first significant chunk of money.
That's incredible. Okay, so people joke about selling ice to an Eskimo, right? You sold a travel company in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. How did you do that?
At a discount.
How like, I've talked to somebody who sold like a $100 million company in January that said that if he post COVID, it would have been like probably, sold it for 30 or 40 type of thing. And is it that type of discount, like a 60, 70% discount type of thing?
Yeah. I mean, we sold it for significantly less than we would have had it not happened. But it was still an outcome that everyone liked, everyone was happy with. But how we sold it is, we found a company that, in these types of, when there's like traumatic economic events, there's also opportunities. And there was a company that wanted to have a digital online booking tool. And, this for on our half, this, turmoil for a company where our revenue fell immediately created an interest like for the investors to do a deal that they wouldn't have done, a year earlier.
And just to confirm, this whole the whole concept started off as a business, as a consumer website, and then at some point, didn't you pivot over to a business?
Yeah. So we built Wherefore.com, and we launched it at South by Southwest in 2016, and we were able to get like about 1 million users within the first week of launching it.
How the hell did you get 1 million users?
There's a quote that I really like by one of the founders of Y Combinator. He says, "Do things that don't scale so that you can later do things that scale." And it's a brilliant quote because it's counterintuitive. Most people think that when they're growing their company, the whole thing has to be done in a scalable way. But many companies did the beginning of their journey. They did things in a very manual, laborious way, personally doing labor-intensive things.
Maybe like the difference between me personally emailing 1,000 people versus like finding ways to do automated emails or something like that.
Right. You can later worry about automation, but at the beginning stage of a company, your job is just to get business, no matter how you do it. So, how we got 1 million users. So on stage, I had delivered what I thought was a fantastic presentation, and there was press in the room, and I was sure that just being on stage at South by Southwest was going to be what made our product famous. At the next day, nobody had picked up the story. like, okay, cool. This is one of 6 companies on stage is one event.
Right.
It wasn't in TechCrunch the next day.
Wow.
The way that we did get in TechCrunch is we found out, my wife and I, who was a co-founder of the company with me, we found out of where there was a TechCrunch party at South by Southwest. And we went to this like closed only journalist party, and I snuck in.
That's incredible.
She basically distracted the doorman, and I went right behind the door, the doorman with the clipboard's back, as if I was in high school trying to get into a club.
Wow.
And then once I was inside, I like saw somebody with a TechCrunch badge, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, "I'd love to tell you about this new idea I have." And at first he like kind of rolled his eyes and was like, "All right, tell me." And then I told him, and he was like, and he took out his laptop from his backpack, and he said, "Can I interview you over here in the corner?" I was like, "Yes, you can." So
Wow.
he brought me to the corner of this loud bar, South by Southwest, and interviewed me. The next morning, he sent me a text saying published. And we had so many users from that TechCrunch article that our servers crashed. And then the next day it was written up in Lifehacker, and it was in BuzzFeed. I was in Marie Claire the next month.
So without you sneaking into that party, you're not sitting here today.
I don't think I'd be here today.
Isn't that amazing?
If I hadn't relied on like an old school growth hack. I mean, you find your growth hack. As a startup, you have to find it's gonna be something surprising. You got to take advantage of the moment, and get it done.
Incredible.
So I quit when I said before, like I quit after it was de-risked. I left the law firm after we got that 1 million users on the platform. The problem was very few of those users were booking trips on our platform. They were like going to Expedia to book, the flight and hotel. They were like, "Oh, awesome! I can go to Marrakesh from LA this weekend for $800. Now let me go to Expedia where I don't think they're going to steal my money." I'm like, where4.com. So we lost.
You didn't have the trust in the consumer, so they were using it as kind of like a gamification of how to get my trip the cheapest, but then moving on to a different website to pay for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we had like a leak at the end of our funnel.
Yeah.
So we were, I had ideas on how to fix that, and we started to do it. But within weeks of launching the website, I got a phone call from an executive at a Fortune 10 company who used it for her personal travel and thought that it was so quick the way it planned her whole trip that she thought that if it was applied to business travel, if our like kind of outside of the box algorithm approach to booking travel could be applied to corporate travel, that it would be a game changer in the industry.
Wow.
So I flew out to their headquarters and learned about business travel and the problem with it and how clunky Concur is and all the big booking tools, and how like thirsty the big companies were for new technology. So we decided, and also the best from a company standpoint, enterprise sales is very lucrative and sticky because the company mandates that all of its employees use your platform.
Sure.
So it's a
and
wonderful.
companies are like once they buy new technology, everybody starts to use it. the retention rate is pretty high because they don't want to spend the energy and time
Exactly.
to move away
You
from
get
it.
years-long contracts
Yeah.
for that reason. And then that also increases the value of your company if you sell it because of the stickiness
Sure.
of your customers. It's not transactional. With Expedia, it's a tough business in consumer travel because people are generally just chasing the best deals. They're not loyal to a brand. They're really as an online booking tool, they're not loyal to a brand. They'll go wherever they get the cheapest deals.
Right.
Anyways, we realized business travel would be a lucrative opportunity for us, and we pivoted completely in 2017 from consumer travel to corporate travel.
Okay, and then you basically build out this company and ultimately sell it. And we'll get sort of back to it in a second. So, what exactly did you guys end up doing to help businesses?
Yeah, it had very little in common. Wherefore, you just enter a single piece of information, your budget, and then plan your trip. With Where To, you put in your destination, your meeting location, and the algorithm would plan your whole trip around exactly where your business meeting is. So if it's a conference or like a meeting in a restaurant, you just say where you're going and where you're starting. And our algorithm would plan your whole trip. It would find the right hotel that's close to your meeting. It would pick the right airports, factoring in traffic. It would pick a flight that balances your loyalty accounts and your personal interests against the company's travel policies.
Wow.
So it was like the opposite. Like one, you put in just the budget to get back results. And for us, well, not exactly the opposite, but you put in just the destination and it would plan your whole trip. So it helps companies save a ton of money because people don't make frivolous options when it kind of helps them plan their trip for them. And it saves a lot of time because it only takes about 6 minutes per trip to book the entire thing, as opposed to like about 30 to 45 minutes in concur.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that like travel is such a major component of these enterprises' budget.
For many companies, their travel budget is their second or third biggest expense.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So if you can save 5-10%, it's tens of millions of dollars per year.
Yeah. Back to when you're first taking this shot. Why did you think that this was possible? Because in law school and, growing up, you wanted stability. I get that you sort of de-risked it as much as you could, but why did you think that you were going to be able to actually create a sustainable lifestyle and career for yourself, taking this risky entrepreneur route?
I mean, it was iterative. Like I had to prove to myself each step of the way that it was the right move.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't one of those people that wanted to be an entrepreneur or like a founder my whole life. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was young. So it really came down to each step of the way. I found that I was doing a good job of each part of it, from raising money to building a team to closing deals. And I found step by step as I went from like being a $500,000 company to a $5 million company to a $25 million company. Each step I saw that I was doing okay.
So what do you think it was? What was was it a mindset thing? What was it? What was it that you think gave you this winning attitude or capability?
I mean, I definitely don't really, I don't take an obstacle as such very easily, right? If I think a lot of people, I'll give you an example. When I first was building Wherefore, I had to hire coders to execute the idea. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that they told me when they did some research is that we can't do this. We can't build a budget-based search engine because the APIs that they have access to don't work that way. Expedia is built how it is because underneath Expedia is a structure of getting the prices that requires that on the back end they put in a destination. So they said, sorry, you have to come. And I was like, okay, well, that's why most people stop looking. Let's look a step deeper. And then I dove deeper and I did research on the GDS, Global Distribution System. Mm-hmm. That's the underlying architecture that all online booking tools are sat on top of. Mm-hmm. And I researched how the searches are structured and came up with a pretty simple layer of software that would sit on top of the GDS that would, from a user standpoint, make it look like, actually deliver the information needed for a budget-based search. Mm-hmm. But it took not taking no as an answer.
And it also takes a work ethic. And I wonder, like, what's your take on work ethic as it applies to yourself and as to your team of employees? How do you view work ethic? Is like, it's such a weird topic, but it's such an important one because, a lot of us think that, is it work hard versus work smart? What's your take?
I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms to get people to work hard. And I think it's on a hierarchy. The highest, most motivating thing in the world is to care about the result, to feel ownership of it, and for you to want the thing to exist in the world. So for me, Wherefore was very compelling because I had always wanted to be able to search by budget. So it was really thrilling to have the opportunity to bring that product to the world.
Yeah.
So when you're creating a company, you think about all the ways that you can motivate an employee to do their best. And the best thing you can do is get them to really care about the result. That certainly includes economic ownership, like equity in the company.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's finding people that share your vision and want the thing to happen that you're doing.
And then you obviously dealt with all sorts of obstacles, as you talked about before, with people saying you couldn't build the app.
Right.
What are some of the tough calls you've had to make in order to make this thing work?
Oh man!
So what's the toughest call? I know at some point you basically removed yourself as a CEO. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing by far.
Why? Why was it hard, and why'd you do it? Was it imposed on you?
Yeah, no.
So why'd you do it?
My wife got a opportunity to get a higher position if she moved to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. She works at Fox, and she had this awesome opportunity to become a VP of technology there. She was working on the East Coast, and it required that we move to New York. So I called up my investor and I said, good news, we're moving to New York, but don't worry, I'll fly I planned it out. I'm going to fly every Monday and come back Thursday. And his answer was, no, you're not. That's never going to work. We've had that happen before and it just doesn't work. You're going to burn out after a few months. And I kind of thought that was an impasse, but he thought about it and he's like, if we can bring in a rock star CEO to run the company locally in San Francisco, in that case, you could move to the East Coast.
Was that an ego check for you though? Because it was almost like a backwards way. Was he thinking that you basically needed to replace yourself as a CEO?
Was it an ego? Can you rephrase that?
So he basically seems like he was very open to basically saying, okay, well, you're moving to the East Coast and we need to, let's just find a better, or a CEO that could replace you.
No, it wasn't an ego check because, I knew that I wasn't great as a CEO, as a manager of this growing company. I knew that I wasn't great. It wasn't my strength.
How'd you have that level of introspection?
Yeah. So, I mean, everything you do as a CEO or everything you do as a manager is magnified on the people beneath you because they'll kind of repeat your mistakes to their team and everything is magnified. So to get and I've never managed people before this company. So to get an honest appraisal of myself, I hired a executive coach to come in and to interview all of the employees to ask how I am, do a blind, anonymous appraisal of myself. And, I told everyone to be very honest because this is really something that I'm going to internally use. And at that time it was totally internal. It was but it came back very, very negative. I got back I think my average was a 2.3 out of 5.
Wow. That had to be tough for you.
Yeah, it was definitely tough. Mainly I was micromanaging. People felt like I was kind of interfering with what they were doing and swooping in. And so I was frustrating a lot of the key people in my company. So I knew as soon as I got the results of that I had some serious work to do. Mm. And I think, the team, I think my investor knew that. He's been around great CEOs and some of the best in America. So it was clear that I wasn't one of those, at least at that point. So that's why he was open to this change. Mm. And I was open to it because, our economic interests were aligned.
Yeah.
I never had an ego to build this thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted the thing to exist in itself. So if I could make more money and if the thing could be built better with somebody else as the captain, I would want that outcome.
Yeah, I think I have like that whole thing too. I don't have an ideology about how things get done as long as they get done.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important lesson for everybody to take. And then to that point, you actually came back as CEO.
Yeah.
What did you learn and how has it been?
I had the benefit of watching the CEO. I became president when I gave up that role. And Chris, he was VP of product at Box, became our CEO. And he's just a very seasoned executive in Silicon Valley. And I was able to learn how to kind of guide without feeling overbearing. Basically, is how not to micromanage.
That's hard.
So it's still hard, and it's still something I struggle with, but I find myself taking a pause before reacting, taking a walk before reacting, just kind of letting things pass a few paces before doing something. And it's helped a lot. So having a kind of a model was the difference. Honestly, in the legal law firms are almost like the military.
Yeah.
Like there's unquestioned chain of command from like managing partner to junior partner to a senior associate, junior associate. So I was kind of used to that level of discipline and expectations.
Well, also and what's interesting is like we all know that creates a miserable atmosphere.
Yeah, and there's like it's a culture. There's like no expectation of people having fun or enjoying
Right.
it. It's like
like law firms are just like accepted. You're going to be miserable.
You're going to be miserable, but you're going to make good money.
Right.
So in tech, there's great job. There's like beer, on tap in a lot of places in Kombucha.
Right. Kombucha.
And so you just have to create a culture where people are enjoying themselves. And it took me. There was some transition to get from the miserable.
You're like, I don't want
culture.
you to be enjoying yourself.
Yeah. And like the amount of hours that we work and everything. So it was a combination. I think what allowed me to get back into the CEO. Now I'm CEO again and I'm enjoying it. And I think it's going better. And it's a combination of having someone, a role model, and also just kind of getting out of the legal game.
Amazing. When it comes to strategy versus tactics, right? So the strategy would be in the way I think about it is as a up and coming lawyer. When I came into work every day, it was like in the cases, right? It was in the cases. What kind of discovery we're going to do today? What kind of depositions are we going to take? What kind of document review we're going to do? It was very rare to pull back and say like, how are we going to look at all these cases? How are we going to improve the whole process? How are we going to, as a law firm, going to make this law firm better? And so I wonder, how did you get to the point, and how do you deal with tactical versus strategic?
Yeah, OKRs. I mean, there's a lot of ways, but I like OKRs the best.
What's an OKR?
An objective and key result. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of the modern approach in Silicon Valley. It's been Google uses it, and Intel used it before that under Andy Grove. Mm-hmm. It's to come up with a clear objective for your company and also for your department that rolls up to the company-wide objective.
Yeah.
And then you figure out what the key result is per person or per team that tells you that you're on track to your key result, and you hold people accountable to their OKR, to their objective and their key result. So instead of dictating how an employee does their job, you just are super clear about what you want them to achieve, and then you give them flexibility to figure out how to do it.
Do you apply that same thing for yourself? It's probably harder to do for yourself.
I mean, that's the privilege of being CEO, is that like that is your only mechanism, is you have an outcome and you're tracked by a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of investors, employees are relying on you, and no one's telling you how to do it. They're just telling you what you have to do.
And then as a lawyer, we didn't learn a lot about business in law school, right?
Zero.
They didn't tell you. Yeah, zero, literally zero. So what's one thing you wish you would have known about being an entrepreneur? And this doesn't just apply to lawyers. It applies to basically everybody. There's not really a big emphasis on entrepreneurship across the board.
Yeah.
What's something that you would have liked to have known and that you think that it could be helpful to people that want to get on this entrepreneurship track?
Yeah, I think it's to realize that there's no type that's an entrepreneur, and to not be worried if you don't fit that type that you kind of envision as the CEO or entrepreneur type. I mean, I started a software company. You know, we've sold it, but I have no technical abilities. So it's all about entrepreneurship is about this identifying what your value is and finding people that add their own value to the thing.
So the idea is that it's possible, that the idea that you are not necessarily thinking as an entrepreneur or you're intimidated by it.
Yeah, to not be intimidated, you know, to break. It's like I believe heavily in first principles, where you you just you break down a language until it's at a point that you understand, and then you work at that level and talk to people at that level to try to problem solve. It doesn't work for everything because you have to hire specialists and let them have domain over their area, but as an entrepreneur, you just have to break things down to a first principles level. You
have a brain that works. And I remember like when I first met you, you created this, this guide for homeless people. This is like 20 years ago. We just met each other and you got a guide for basically how to be homeless, right?
Yeah,
I think it was like, you would literally tell people in the guide, like, hold up the sign a certain way to get more money or whatever.
Yeah.
And that actually is a brilliant idea. It's also like, it's not that novel. Like you look back at it and you're like, that actually is a common sense idea. And I think a lot of technology and a lot of businesses start up and you look back and say, that was so obvious. Like, why didn't I come up with that? But your brain thinks a little bit differently, and maybe you can just give us a little bit of like a couple lessons that you've learned throughout your journey that might be helpful to people.
Yeah, how to get changed in the streets. It was a double meaning, right? It was like
that was the title of the book.
Yeah, it started as like tips to get more money, like stuff like I remember like SF Chronicle to take out the restaurant section and sell it to tourists for $1.
Oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant.
But it moved on more like systemic things, like how to organize change for homeless people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny that you remember that.
I clearly remember that. That's a great example of how you think in ways that people don't often think. And so you had this dream to build and sell a company, and you did it. What's your motivation now? There's
still a lot of work ahead of us because the acquiring company, now we have to integrate our product to theirs. So my motivation is to just continue to grow the company and make sure everyone's happy. I mean, we've lost almost very few people in our company. It's pretty much the same team that was there from day one is still there for the most part. So it's about making sure they're rewarded and happy, and then deliver. They have thousands of customers that are going to use our platform next year. So it's very exciting to kind of connect our technology to tons of new customers.
And you're also the type of person that likes to make social change, as evidenced by your homeless initiative. I got to think that you have something in mind outside of the business world.
Yeah, I mean, I think homelessness is the biggest problem for American society. It's kind of disgusting that most Americans see it as a aesthetic problem. It's like I find it ironic that Republicans these days are the ones bringing it up, but it's mainly they're bringing it up because they're complaining about like not being able to park their cars on their streets. Yeah, and the smell. I mean, that's definitely a problem. But compared to the other side of the coin, when you're on the streets and the variety of people, and people tend to think about just the drug addict or the crazy, the people with mental problems, but there's also tons of single women that just divorced their husbands and have kids and need to couch surf for like 3 months, and people that just couldn't make ends meet for a couple months. Like, homelessness comes in so many different varieties, and my idea of just kind of early stage on it is to come up with, to have a kind of like an adoption platform where you can sponsor specific homeless people with specific needs, and there'd be consultants that comb a city to find those cases, those individuals that could be helped with a specific thing.
I like that.
So you'd get to you'd spend $5,000 to help a person with 6 months of rent, or help them with a wardrobe or career training or whatever the specific need is. There'd be an intermediary, kind of a social worker that helps to facilitate the thing, and then you follow up with them 6 months later to see what happened.
From your lips. I mean, that's a great concept. So
Yeah, it's to treat homelessness less as a block, as a singular problem, and to start treating it as something, a terrible thing that all different types of people have to go through at different stages.
and knowing you're going to build it out at some point. Okay, so
Hopefully.
let's move on to legal tip of the week. Legal Tip of the Week is sponsored by Smith & Benowitz. It's an employment, personal injury, and class action law firm. And so there's a common misconception that if you quit, I can't sue my employer. I quit, so I can't sue. No, there are occasions where there's a hostile, intolerable, or dangerous environment. It was so bad that you had to quit. And in those circumstances, you may have a claim. Just because you quit, you still may have a claim. So if you're in that circumstance, feel free to call us, Smith & Benowitz. Ryan, give us, even though you're not a practicing attorney, in the context of you being an entrepreneur, give us a legal tip of the week.
A couple. One is, and don't worry about NDAs most of the time. You know, when you have an idea, it's really not, it's worth very little. It really is about like how you build it, how you execute the strategy, the team, all that.
Yeah.
So you have, you just look foolish when you like make people sign an NDA before you tell them about it, your idea. So just don't worry about those, number one. Number two, I think for a lot of business people, they don't really understand the basics of a contract. They always tell lawyers to like add legalese to something. They're like, okay, here's what I want, add the legalese. And I encourage our team to think about as much as possible the business aspects of the contract before giving it to a lawyer. Lawyer's not going to know the risks, the business points to think about. So it's just to put together a document with details about what you're looking for, what you fear about the other party. You know, think about what are the most likely ways that they could screw you over. Mm-hmm. And then share that information with your attorney. Don't expect your attorney to be the one to come up with that. You know, think about, you know, how strong do you want the relationship to be? Do you see yourself wanting to have flexibility to get out of the contract, or would you rather lock things in because you don't want flexibility on the other side? So my tip is to just think through the business parts of a contract before sending it to a lawyer to add the legalese.
That's great. I love it. Ryan, thank you so much. I think the audience is going to get a lot out of this. Where can we find you online and follow your journey?
My company is where2.com, and I'm on the website there, but you can always email me at ryan@where2.com.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Law Flip, we will see you next week.
Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Ariane, they're asking where they could find us. So for Law Flip, it's at Law Flip and lawflip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and smithbenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benji Smith and benjismith.com, at Wages Guru and lewisbenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so Law Flip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the Law Flip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. And lastly, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.